Hello, everybody. Hi, hello. So my name is Govi, and before we start this session, we would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, the Darug people. For over 60,000 years, the area comprising present-day Parramatta has been occupied by the Burra-Matagal people, clan of the Darug, who first settled along the upper reaches of the Parramatta River. Now, welcome to the panel session. Hi, hello everybody. So my name is Gobi. We're from Mercularis, and we are, pleased to have assembled what I feel is like a star-studded cast of people whom I'm really glad that I've had a chance to meet, if for no other reason other than to actually hear what they have to say. So this is gonna be, shall we say, yes, it's a formal conference, but it's gonna sound a bit like a podcast as well. And I will try to dial down the excitement while I'm doing that. The session is recorded, and what we will do is we will start off with a brief description of what Mercularis does. I would like to share with you. So it's our exciting new startup. And effectively, what we do is this. So Mercularis, which is actually from the Latin mercatus circularis, which means circular marketplace, the whole purpose why we started this was to empower digital circular economies, because there was always going to be so many of them that were going to be created. And we realized that, you know what, we don't want to compete, we want to complement. If you want to do something and have a really good idea, no one should really be stopping you. They should be doing everything in their power to help you. And we wanted to be those kind of people. And that's what we do strive for every day. So we effectively have an AI-powered data nexus, and it's built for everyone to use. It's scalable, right? And it's aimed at being easy and quick to use for whether you're an individual, an institution, or an industry looking to participate or even create your own circular economy. And it creates new value, whether it's through new products, or whether it's new revenue streams, or simply new relationships, or perhaps a new supply chain logistic. And of course, the AI helps you with things like forecasting, so you actually know the reliability of your supply chain in assessment. And of course, as with all good things, to give that fuzzy feeling right at the end, we do it because it's good for the world, right? A safer and more sustainable, secure future. The other thing about Mercularis is that we effectively, yes, it's built around AI, and we use that to effectively provide data, which then helps us provide information, and on top of that, answers towards questions that are pretty much aimed at what is the circular economy, how can I take part in it, and how can I create one? So we do it via thought leadership and research, because I do wear two hats. I also do research at the University of Sydney, who is also obviously this organizer of this event. We also do it via engagement and education, right, with our individuals, institutions, and industries, as I mentioned. And the whole aim for this is to create like a virtual marketplace where, buyers and sellers of waste do not actually see waste as waste, but rather as a resource, because, one person's trash, another person's treasure, that sort of thing. And coming back to the whole philosophy of it all is that this is, again, not about, me, myself, and I, but really we are doing our parts to do our best, doing what we know. So we understand data, we understand engineering. So, created a startup to help people who, may need our help, right? Or perhaps just let us pitch in, really, to help build circular economies. And that's what this whole thing is about, right? It's not just about us. And so to that end, I would actually like to move on to introduce our panel for today. So we have, Cam McKenzie, right, from Aspire, and they basically built an AI-driven platform. If you correct me if I'm wrong, Cam was from Cyro and Data61. That basically, it's an AI-driven platform that matches buyers with sellers. You've got, Steve Morris from the Australian Circular Economy Hub, had a big launch, right, Steve? That was good on you. And yeah, that's right. And you also have Dr. Raymond Trevorah out of regional New South Wales in Bathurst. You have Adrian Liew joining us from Singapore. So yes, this is one of those actual international conferences where Sydney to Singapore and everything in between. although it is a circle, so that's pretty much everyone. We have Carlos from AECOM, geotech engineer, and also Puva Rajaratnam, also geotech engineer over at AECOM. And it is our firm belief that because everyone has something important to say, it's probably a really good idea to actually hear them say it. So I would like to start by passing over the mic to Cam McKenzie to tell us more about Aspire, your journey, and then we'll go through all the panelists as well. Over to you, Mac.
No worries. Thanks for the introduction, and yeah, it's great to be a part of this panel today. It's yeah, it's good to see so many great minds, discussing some really important objectives and some outcomes that we're all looking to do. So, which is great. Yeah, I'll give you a little bit of a background about Aspire. Yeah, you're right. It was created by CSIRO and Data61. Kicked off in 2015 as a marketplace for commercial, industrial excess waste and resource. Some people call us Tinder for waste. We get that a lot, but we go a lot more in depth than that. So, CSIRO, they built an algorithm that actually sits inside Aspire that intellectually matches these businesses. And with that algorithm, we've grabbed that. And we've pretty much relaunched the platform with a brand new front end and back end to make it very intuitive. And with that, the new platform where one of the reasons why I'm in Tasmania at the moment is we launched in Tasmania a few months ago, which is great. And we're really starting to build the ecosystem down here. We launched in Queensland probably about 2 or 3 months ago, and that's doing great guns. It's doing some really, really great stuff. And we're in talks with some pretty big utility companies are in the APAC region about trying to bring circularity to their supply chains and value chains. One of the cool things about Aspire is it allows anyone from an LGA to a big business to be that thought leader and really drag their supply and value chain into circular behaviours, which is really, really cool. So one thing about me, I worked 20 years in the construction industry, and coming from an apprentice right up to a project manager, construction manager, yeah, nothing's really changed. Everything's very, very similar. As an apprentice, you're always taught to put the hazardous stuff and all the bad stuff at the bottom of the skip and not to separate, where now, that's no longer feasible, and we really need to start looking at more circular objectives and really try to do some things better for the environment and create that impact and really double down on that triple bottom line, which I think everyone on this panel can resonate with, which is really fantastic. So yeah, so that's a little bit about Aspire, and we're launching all around Australia. We're about to launch a pilot in Hong Kong in the new year, which is super exciting. Can't wait to get that up and running, and with that, yeah, hopefully global domination. We'll see how we go, but primarily at the moment, Aspire really wants to make a difference in the Australian ecosystem, and it's my home, it's everyone's home on this call, and except Adrian. I know you're in Singapore at the moment, but yeah, we're all trying to work together and come up with some feasible and real and measurable outcomes, which is fantastic.
That's perfect, Cameron. Thank you so much. That was very well put. And at this point, I should probably point out that this energy is what I really love about this panel, because everyone whom I've spoken to, because obviously we've connected before this, because we want to see whether it will be a good fit for each other to talk to and for the panel. And I must say, like, everyone just hit all the tick boxes I didn't know I had, because when you look at someone, I always found that the tech took care of itself, but it's really the people that drive it. You need someone to just say, let's just get to it, and you go, yeah, that's right, let's do it, and I got that from everybody. So yeah, and speaking of energy, Steve Morris from Australian Circular Hub. Steve, would you like to tell us more about Planet Arc and what the hub is up to?
Yes, thanks, Gobi, and good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, great to be here. I will try and tone it down a bit today, because the last panel I was on, somebody put in the chat that I looked and sounded like a football commentator. So I'll keep my tone down a little bit. I am absolutely passionate about the circular economy. I've got a background about 35 years in circular economy, actually. So I'm one of the old guys of this new terminology. But as we all know, there's been so many iterations of different wording that you can put around the circular economy. So I started in restoration. building materials, so a bit of demolition, restoration, then restoration of furniture. So that's the remanufacturing, reuse piece. And more recently into resource recovery, a company I founded 20 years ago called Close the Loop. We're now into advanced manufacturing of, turning waste materials into products of value. And our claim to fame there is Tonoplast, which is an asphalt additive that improves the performance of asphalt roads, and it's made from waste soft plastics. So, but back to the hub, my other hat, which I love dearly, is as head of circular economy development at the Australian Circular Economy Hub, which is a very flash title for a guy that sort of builds networks and links international opportunities in the circular economy to Australian business, as well as, of course, taking an active role in all areas of the development of the hub, which is the glue that binds the transition to circularity in Australia. At least that's our objective. Our vision is for a circular world. That hub you can visit right now because, as Gobi quite graciously mentioned, we've recently launched at the Sydney Opera House. We allowed 85 people there, which was fantastic. And indeed, now you can go online to circulareconomyhub.org.au. Some great resources there, but we're building. Early days, folks, but we are building. And two of the big projects relevant to today: circular procurement, circular metrics. How do we measure circularity? The Australian Circularity Gap Report, which we are building, we want to dovetail into a global circularity gap report, and that includes data from all around the country, including our friends in the regions. Very, very important. So I'll hand on from there, but be a passionate, active participant in the panel. Thank you.
All right, cheers, Steve. There's still a lot of energy. You're getting a bit of goosebumps over here. So yeah, that's actually really interesting because, well, we've obviously had a chat about with the ACE Hub as well. And again, this is not one of those normal panels where everyone gives a presentation and then, okay, what's next? But really, at the end of the day, at this point, I should highlight both as a chair and as someone who's actually keen about the circular economy, because it's really the people that get you going, as I said earlier. But at the same time, this is simply a spark, right? This is the spark, so that people will go look at Cameron, will look at Steve, Ray, Carlos, Puva, and Adrian, and hopefully me. But at this point, it's really all about creating the conversation and actually doing something about it, not the whole rolling up your sleeves thing. So Steve, thank you so much. At this point, it would be nice to hear from someone who actually works on the ground. So I'll hand over to Puva from AECOM to hear about how the digital circular economy is, or maybe is not, actually present in the construction space, in the applied field, shall we say. Over to you, Puva.
Oh, thank you, Gopi. Hi, everyone. I'm Puva from AECOM. I work together with Carlos. And I would say that one of the reasons why I'm here now talking about sustainability in the construction space is largely because Carlos introduced me to it. And I'm sure he will expand on it further. So my experience with, I guess, working in a circular economy, it's mainly into looking to use recycled material as part of our construction material for our pavement constructions. And I guess in the digital space, one thing that I guess would be good to have would be, say, a database, which can give us, say, a list of suppliers of, for example, crushed recycled glass, which we use in our asphalt. Carlos is a strong proponent for it, so I'm sure he'll expand on it further. But I guess in the digital space, something that I find would be useful would be to have a central database that can tell us where we can source some materials from, because depending on availability, it can also make certain products more popular than how they are viewed. And as we all know, availability is usually one of the driving components for cost. So that is probably something that would be nice to have. And I guess in my conversations with clients or just within our teams, we also sometimes question, like, what is the kind of quality we can expect from the use of recycled material? And it's not necessarily easy to answer without having, say, a list of specifications telling you this is what our material is like. And in the construction industry, we usually rely on material specifications to tell us if something is suitable or not. So by being on this panel, I was looking to expand more in that area by asking questions and also hearing, answering questions, asking, and also hearing people's views on how they think that this area can be further developed to assist with industry.
Wow, that's awesome. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of us scribbling notes furiously in the background, actually, because yeah, at the end of the day, because it's true, isn't it? Like, well, how shall we say? Everyone's actually keen because, you know, we've got data and everything, but really that is simply the means to an end. You're just connecting suppliers with the users. And you hear a lot from the suppliers, but you rarely hear from the users, interestingly enough. At least that's been my limited experience, although I think it might be universal. And I also think that if you mention someone's name often enough, they suddenly just appear. So Carlos, I'm guessing you're up next, Carlos. Yeah, so I'd like to pass over to Carlos to maybe expand on what, you know, yourself and AECOM think about this database that Puva mentioned, and up to including, say, the specifications, for example, because data is data, but really what data is actually useful, do you think, from a user perspective? Carlos.
Yeah, thanks, Govi, and thanks, Pua, for having me here. Everything was connected. And yeah, I am a pavement engineer in AECOM, and probably for most of the people, pavements engineering could be a dark discipline within the, say, engineering, but I refuse to that term. In fact, I think we are one of the greenest. And that is the color I try to use when referring for pavements in spreadsheets. And that is, in fact, one of the areas that I enjoy the most, trying to find opportunities or technologies to implement within pavements to become the construction at the end of the day more sustainable. And in fact, I was heavily involved in wall mixers, for example, but one day I came across with one document from, and this is what I wanted to share just quickly, one document from RMS. Hopefully you can see my slide. And in this, in their environmental sustainability strategy, they want, there is a target to recycle X number of percentage of material, and in that element they were referring specifically to glass, and this was like clicking things in my head, and I need to implement this. So I started to trying to connect to different people, because at the end of the day you need the expert from one end to the suppliers with of glass, with the supplier of asphalt. And for example, I'm glad to say that today, in fact, this is just tonight, we will be laying the first asphalt tones within RMS roads. This has been done in other sites, but in RMS, in our program is the first time. So I'm very, very happy for that. And in terms of how we can use data, Puva has mentioned before, will be nice to have probably some resource linking suppliers of these materials or recycled material with suppliers of the end material, but also for road agencies or designers, a resource to know where these materials were placed, what is the performance, so we can build like a knowledge base or database to build on and to be able to gradually use this type of technologies more and more. So I'm very happy to be here, and I see that from here we can connect more with others, with Steve. He was talking about toner plant. That was one of my other, well, no, it's not my idea, other dreams that I will have to implement at some point. But so very happy to listen to everyone, and thanks for to Gobi to invite me to this chat. Yeah.
No, thank you, Carlos. Again, you know, there's no me, it's us. So thank you so much, because I was pretty sure once, you know, I actually met you that it was really interesting what you had to say, because you are right, it can be a bit of a black box. And for someone who wants to color it green, I think that's a really noble effort, because at the end of the day, yes, we can set up a whole data platform. It will run on AI from, you know, the next century. That's fine. But at the end of the day, if, you know, we do not have someone to send that stuff to, right, to connect them with, it's still going to go into landfill. It's just going to be waiting for a day that never comes. So, you know, thank you for the colors, so the world will come forth and say, yep, give me your rubbish, you know, I'll put it into the ground and you can drive on it tomorrow, that kind of a thing. Yeah, I think that's awesome. And on that note, right, so we talked about users, but in terms of suppliers, it would be really interesting as well. And at this point, I would love to introduce Dr. Raymond Trevorah from Bathurst. Now, Raymond, the first time I met him, I really liked him a lot. I liked all of you a lot. And Ray was, because it was direct and straight to the point. And he said that, look, you know, here in regional councils, we have the ability, you know, to basically stop sending things to landfill. And he said it with so much a conviction. And then I found out why, because I'm sure Ray will tell you this in a moment, but in case it's just a bit too humble to, I'll say it anyway. But Ray was, you know, a great pushing force down in Victoria, where he was just before he came up to Bathurst. And you know, it's people like Ray that really give you the confidence that, yep, if I actually digitize something, there will be people on either end. There'll be a Ray and a Carlos, you know, and then you have people like Steve, Cam, you know, in the middle. And down the line, I'll tell you why, but, you know, you have Adrian to help engage people, you know, and you, well, at this point, I am going to stop talking and hand it over to Ray. Ray, go for it.
Thanks, Gobi. So I'm Ray, I'm from Bathurst Council. And I am currently on the land of the Wurundjeri people, who are the traditional owners of the land. And I'd like to thank their elders past, present, and emerging. So I'm just going to bring up my slide here. So my background was originally in research, and I've made a transition from research to local government. And one thing I found very interesting was there wasn't a huge amount of use of data. There was people collecting data, but there wasn't much focus on it. So I'm a strong proponent of good data driving good decisions. So when I first got into council, I started collecting all the data I could and using that to help focus what we can do to drive a circular economy in our regions. Since being in local government, I was down in Victoria for a couple of years, and now I've moved up to New South Wales to look after some regional New South Wales waste. In terms of a nation, we've got some targets that we've set. So we want to hit an 80% recovery rate by 2030. And looking at the stats over on the side, we can see that within our municipal solid waste, we're not doing good. We're currently sitting lowest, and that sits lower for regional on top of that. So regional New South Wales is currently sitting at about 42% resource recovery rate. That leaves a huge amount of items that I'm chucking into the landfill up the hill behind me. And from that, I've done a bit of analysis of my own site, and I can see that 66% of my site, 66% of what I bring into my site is general waste that goes for immediate burial, with only 3% of what comes onto my site being sent for recycling outside of my site. But it's just not accurately making use of the material getting, because I know a significant portion of what's coming into my site could be recovered if it was better sorted or managed. So using audits of our material and analysing that data of what makes up that fraction that ends up in my landfill, we can look at where we need to target to hit those recycling rates and make strong regional circular economies. So in a previous role, I did a bit of study down on what can be done to manage glass. I looked through my recycling, found that we had about 30% of our recycling was glass. We operated some trials, we did some analysis, we did engagement with the people, and we introduced a curbside glass service earlier this year before I came at Bathurst, and that went well. I worked with the MRFs and the end markets, as well as my own local markets for glass to help drive that decision making. Additionally, with food organics, I looked at different options for how a service could be rolled out, what changes need to be driven, what barriers of behaviour need to be changed to implement a service. And after the introduction of my glass and FOGO services, that council's diversion and resource recovery rate went from the mid-30s up to 70% in the span of 2 months before I subsequently came up to New South Wales. So what I want to get across is that local government's data is going to be important for driving our circular economies, and we're going to have to share that data, where some councils aren't properly doing that or doing it very well. New South Wales WA reports are good, but we're going to have to engage with industry, have our data available, and work together to establish our regional circular economies. Okay, and I'll pass it back.
Okay, so first of all, wow, did I hear that correctly? Or was it just my internet? So it was mid 30% until 70. So we're talking about doubling, 100% increase.
I think the exact numbers went from 36% around Christmas time up to 70%. But there was a bit of a caveat because I got a lot more glass as soon as that first lockdown hit Victoria than I expected.
Right. Okay. So you did that in 2 months. What could you do in 2 years, Ray? Wow.
I see.
Yeah, I mean, we're not supposed to gush over panelists, but wow, Ray, good on you, man. That's awesome. That's really awesome. And imagine how many people out there want to do the same kind of things. And that's what we're really hoping to inspire. Like I said, not really a panel, more like a podcast, really. This is what this is. And on that note, right, I actually have to point out that at the end of the day, speaking of engaging people and, effectively stakeholders, right? You got the people who have the actual, what I dare say waste, but really resource sitting there. It just had to be pre-sorted. That was all it needed to be done. And someone could just come and pick it up off of you. Isn't it? That's as simple. Call you, hey, I'm coming in this hour, 3 o'clock. I need a ton of recycled glass. Hopefully it's clean, not contaminated. And there you go, right? Landfill crisis averted. And, that's a kind of stakeholder engagement. And then there's also other people, like such as ourselves with our Nexuses, with Cam's Aspire AI-enabled platform, and Steve, who's just, racing, ready to go to connect A and B and C to get to work and things like that, and then you have Carlos who are waiting at the other end. So, okay, give us a recycled glass. We're ready to do something good with it. And it comes down to stakeholder engagement, I'll say again. And at this point, it's a very good juncture to hand over to Adrian Liew, all the way from Singapore, all right? And, through your internet service provider to your screen. And Adrian, we would love to hear from you how your OPPi AI-enabled, shall we say, engagement platform can actually help pool people together who really need to be talking to each other instead of just, thinking that maybe they're the only ones who think that way.
Thank you, Gopi, for having me on this conference. I will have to admit that among the panelists, our product has to be the newest kid on the block to be exposed to the circular economy. And of course, thanks to you, we realized that our goals and values are aligned. And that's what you really say, the people is the heart of everything in what we wanted to do. And so let me just pull out the slide to share a little bit of what OPPi does. So for the longest time, stakeholders engagement has been always a one-way street. We've been looking at it, it seems linear. You can call it as linear. Every single day, our stakeholders along the chain get engaged through some surveys. You look at it through some workshop or focus group, or as many of the panelists have mentioned, engaging them to try to do pre-sorting and so on and so forth. But all this feedback sometimes gets into a black hole, and we never know whether these valuable views are used or considered, depending on who actually conducts all this engagement. And this, if you think about it, can be also considered as a waste. All these values, this energy, these ideas that are generated, where does it go to? And that's what OPPi aims to change. Our OPPi platforms wants to help organizations and individuals to engage stakeholders better and to then drive deeper conversations through this concept we call regenerative engagement, which is kind of similar to what circular economy talks about. And because of that, then stakeholders in every step of this process gets to be engaged, and we want their ideas to be implemented within or along the supply chain. We want to then unlock value at every stage of this process from the stakeholders who are engaged in this on our platform. And because of OPPi, the stakeholders can have a deep conversations and discover a common ground on what are the possibilities that can happen. Through this platform, we might want to ask this possible question: how might we be able to relook at the waste produced and put it to better use? We want the stakeholders then to think very deeply about this problem, generate ideas, and benefit everyone in the process. And this is something that we believe in, that we believe that this type of regenerative engagement will keep the stakeholders going and motivated because they own the ideas, because they generate the ideas themselves, and they discover common ground among all the other stakeholders. So this could finally help us to have a circular economy that can have a win-win situation for everyone. So that's a very brief overview of OPPi, and then happy to chat more about this.
All right, good stuff. Thanks, Adrian. I remember, yeah, because the first time we met, the question was actually from yourself to me, which is, yes, great enthusiasm, but what do you want me to talk about, right? That's actually everyone's answer. I can see Ray nodding. Carlos is, yep, he's got his, past 48 hours flashing in front of his eyes, that kind of a thing. But yes, everyone had the same question: what do I have to talk about? And then they went on to say stuff that made me go, that is what you talk about, right? Everything that you have to say. I mean, it was obvious that, Ray had stuff that he didn't want to going into the ground, and he had done it before, and he was going to do it again, where he would get people to actually use it, right, for something. And, Steve was never just going to, sort of, how to say, wake up today and say, you know what, today I'm going to give my efforts on the circular economy a break. I don't think Steve ever takes a day off. And, Carlos had a very good point, which is, at the end of the day, they just needed to know where they could get their materials from, and they were actually keen. Same with Trevorah as well. And obviously with Cam, we don't have to say, because I believe that Cam was actually, project managing Aspire before it was Aspire, and Cam made it happen. So when it comes down to this, I would actually say that, in a way, we've actually, if I may, quote Palagola, basically, the universe has conspired that all of us would at some point meet each other and actually do something. And now we are actually well on time, so just past the halfway mark here. And we can open the floor to questions. So effectively, I suppose it's a first question that is sort of cumulative and collectively sort of out of the internet wisdom really at this point, which is the mandatory versus voluntary data. And I'm also looking at public questions that are being, sort of asked here in the polls in the Zoom chat, which is pretty much around the national waste database, because sure, different states, and even as Ray pointed out, different councils have just simply different ways of doing it. Yes, every year you have, the WAR data, the waste and resource recovery data, and that's it, right? So that was for New South Wales from the EPA. And then obviously different states and territories have their own way of administering things. And then above all of that, we have the federal way of doing things. Everyone has different ways of classifying their waste. That's something we've found through our cumulative experience. Because do remember, I wear another hat where, postdoctoral research at Sydney University, and this is what we do day in, day out. So I guess I have a very specific question for Cam, followed by Raymond and Steve, which is, what is the mandatory versus voluntary data that can actually help you, or rather help the end users, right, that you envision, take the waste off of you or via you? So maybe I'll hand the mic over to Cameron.
No worries. Well, yeah, thanks for that. It's a really good question. I think one of the points that sort of everyone's battling at the moment is the standardization across the country of, one regulation, two policy, and the certification of certain streams. Being sort of ASPIRE starting in Victoria, and we're obviously launching around the country, like the way different states transport waste is totally different. It's polar opposites. And again, it's, when we go to a new area, we're going to deal with the EPA, we're going to chat to them about how we can exactly make it work. And that's one of the big problems. Standardization is really great. I know a lot of policies being put in around that. I think a few others can talk about that. But but one of the key aspects that we see to it is pretty much, the voluntary versus mandatory data. The mandatory is great, but that's more of obviously the stick approach. But obviously it's very commercial in confidence, a lot of what businesses do, and it actually goes in and out of the supply chain. And they want to be very cautious about that. They keep those cards close to their chest. So actually getting that information out of them can be quite tricky, or trying to get that trust around it. But there's different ways and means you can do that, like having a central database, try to have it maybe, locked around blockchain or something around that, just to have it secured. There's all different avenues or different aspects to that. We're talking to an organisation at the moment about trying to actually have a look at a central point where we can use blockchain to try to reduce the hacking or the sharing of information that people don't want to be shared. So there's all different ways and means around that. I'm a big believer. I'm a big believer of voluntary, but again, it's that fine line. It's supply versus demand. You want to create those end markets for certain points, but again, it creates a bit of an issue with people actually sharing the data. I think organisations like Enric and Rose Reed, I think they've got some really good things doing in this ecosystem, and what they want to try to do about the standardisation. I think that's going to be a really powerful outcome, hopefully for next year, but we'll sort of see how all that goes.
Awesome. Cheers, Cam. And on that note of, shall we say, voluntary versus mandatory, maybe at this point we can hear from Ray, because, you know, as you said, the councils do different things different ways. At the same time, they all also have to conform, I guess, to, you know, higher levels of the chain, so to speak, of reporting. So, Ray, what can councils do besides the mandatory that will actually help them, you know, get the stuff out of the landfill and into people's hands who would actually use them?
Well, I personally think that one of the key bits of data that isn't really shared around much is compositional analysis of curbside collections. So most councils will have an analysis done. Very, very few will share that information. They'll share it if you ask, but it's very rarely publicised. There is some standardised ones done across different areas and regions by the EPA of different states, but I think sharing of that data allows for better material analysis of the regions. And or if say a plastic recycler is looking to get into a certain region, being able to see how much plastic is coming out of each of the councils around there would help drive them to do better decision making. So I think that is a area of data sharing that could be better improved, and it could be done on a voluntary level. Just a note on the mandatory reporting. It's very interesting to see that I'm not the only one who's noticed the massive differences between states. As someone who does the reporting, it does change a fair bit, coming from Victoria to New South Wales. I did notice within councils and other councils, there is either lack of expertise in the field in some of the more smaller regional councils, where groups like Net Waste or the Victorian Works can assist in better management of that data or assisting the smaller councils in better reporting. But there is still a lack of consistency. Not every landfill has a weighbridge. Not every transfer station calculates volumes the same or weights the same. So there is going to be inconsistencies in that data coming from different council areas.
Okay, so that makes a lot of sense. So it's effectively what, if I understand correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that it's really up to the councils to, shall we say, step up and say that, look, you know, it's not just how much we've got, but this is actually what's in the bin, right? And maybe, if I may, even one level above that is actually the contamination levels, because then you could just, you know, show up and you think you're going to get 100 tons of crushed glass, and then you realize that it's a good bit of, you know, whatever, tuna in it, right? And something like that. So it's really a question of how much do they want to publicize, or at least be willing to explain the state of their waste in terms of the data and things around there. Because data is just a means to an end, right? They're really describing their waste here. And we want them to really be more open, because then it helps us, people who, you know, sit in the middle or want to empower other people, to really connect them up with the people who maybe have the means to even process that contamination, right? Sometimes, you know, you think that you can hide behind the problem when really you can own it instead of letting it own you.
Yep, yeah, that's pretty much what was on there.
Awesome. All right, then I guess it's time to ask Steve, actually, what you think about all of this as well.
Yeah, look, I'd like to talk about one of the foundation principles of the circular economy, which is keeping materials or products in circulation for longer. And if we break that down to atoms and molecules, we want to keep those atoms and molecules in circulation for longer. And, you know, one of the obstacles we must overcome to achieve that is greenwash. And therefore, I'm going to talk a little bit about claims verification and how I see that as a very important element and a very important driver of good data capture. If we can verify the origin or the provenance of a material, let's take soft plastics, for example, because it's something I'm familiar with, and then we follow that through a chain of custody right the way through to the final disposition where the asset owner signs off on that road or whatever it is, and then we can report that to the National Waste Policy or to any of the individual stakeholders. That is a voluntary data capture strategy or tool, where if you want to be in the market, if you want to sell your raw materials, then you must voluntarily verify your claims. And I think that's one example of where I would always fly the flag for voluntary. So yeah, I'll leave it at that, Gobi.
All right. Oh, Steve, that's actually really powerful stuff, because what you really want is for people to take ownership, right? To say that, look, if I come forth and I'm, sort of voluntarily giving up data, I guess at the individual level, it still might be hard, but it doesn't mean that we can't try, because it's individuals put together who make up the institutions in your companies and all of that, right? You just need that one change driver to sort of, shall we say, go all 12 angry men on the problem, right? And just convert everyone around the table. That's actually interesting. So then I guess now it's time to sort of maybe for a bit of a left field question, and this will be aimed at Adrian, Carlos, and Puva, I guess, on the more engagement and end use end of things, which is, okay, yes, we have a lot of data. We have a lot of information on where you can get recycled glass, for example, and let's say we put you on there. Is that really enough? Because I would imagine that things such as a supply chain reliability would actually come into play, and you would need to know that, even if, let's say, it was not for a one-off project, like say this was your day in, day out business, right? 365 days a year. What is missing from simply knowing where you can simply get your raw material from, right? What else would you need to know about it? Obviously, costing is, I guess, one of those unspoken things, unwritten things. I mean, it was so obvious. But what else is there? What are the gaps that, people say from the data world, the sort of more theoretical world might actually miss? Maybe we can start with Adrian.
Thanks. But I think in the line of OPPi, we are in the business of behavioral analytics, and we want to understand the underlying reasons of why people do not want to do certain things. The really collecting opinions, collecting suggestion, and collecting all these different ideas coming forward. Why do they suggest such an idea? Why do they suggest why didn't they want to do pre-sorting? Why did they want to do certain things? In this area, we want to understand the stakeholders. We want to understand the underlying foundation reasons why they did not want to do certain things. And this gives a perspective to people who wants to then change things, to understand where they can start looking at issues. How can they take issues forward? How can they use this data that is collected from all these opinions to then convince the others to follow suit as well, to find the common ground to take the issue forward. I think that's where we are coming from in terms of the behavioral analytics. Okay, interesting. That's a very succinct and very elegant way, because my version of that was just going, why don't people actually do it? So that's actually a very nice way to put it. So maybe from the end user perspective, perhaps Carlos and then Puva, you can also tell us, what is it that you would need to know besides the obvious data things that we've talked about, if you were simply going to, say, jump online onto the, a pretty good virtual marketplace, and actually get that recycled glass, for example, since that was a concrete example. What else would you need to know?
I think if I put, well, as working as a consultant, our main clients will be road agencies like Transport for New South Wales, no? And if we suggest this type of initiatives, there will be two questions. Is there enough material? So there is then the need for data to know that, for example, we have enough recycled glass. And it takes a while to understand how the industry, for example, I'm just focusing on this because I know more about this element, but it takes quite few of research to know how much recycled glass is available in New South Wales. So if there is a repository of information, at least to understand availability of raw resources, that would be fantastic. But then also is the main concern from road agencies is this performing well or not? Because everything looks fine in the lab, but do you have examples? Is just the second question. So then is the following step, and probably Steve has nailed in the head, like a database to trace all the life of the product from the beginning to the end, and you know that using this type of material in this certain condition we have been putting here, and this is the performance. So you can see you have something to refer to, and yeah, I probably that are the two uses that I will use for the data. Amount of material, and then the performance of that material and the history of that across the journey.
Excellent. And now I would like to hear from Puva as well. I think we all would. Would you have anything to add to what Carlos just said from your perspective, please?
I guess I would like to expand on the performance aspect of what Carlos mentioned, because and also Steve talked about the life cycle of the product, where it starts from and then where it ends up. So in the world of the design that I'm mainly involved in, we look at the design life of the structure that we are designing. So if we're looking at pavements, you want to look at something that has a design life of 40 years. And whether you achieve a design life of 40 years or less is dependent on the materials that you use, the amount of maintenance that you do is very much maintenance dependent. And then comes the question of, would I need to do additional maintenance if I was to use recycled material instead of the conventional raw materials that are typically used on the roads? Because the projects that I've been working on recently are largely centered around upgrading of existing infrastructure, upgrading of existing roads. And whenever we put forward a solution or a proposed solution, we get the question on, we found that there's some deficiencies in maybe some of the existing materials, and we are looking for a solution where we do not necessarily have to do as much of maintenance. Maybe you just have insufficient space to keep going into the site to do maintenance work. So you want something that's a bit more maintenance free. And the materials that we look at should help to complement that aspect as well that the client is looking for. And it comes down to, I guess, comparing what we do in the labs when we do the testing to prove that something can sustain that design life, and whether that necessarily translates to what's happening in real life conditions. And that gap is, it's easy to ask that question, like, can this satisfy the requirements? Not so easy to answer that question, but perhaps if there's data that can show that we have used this material in some other places and it has stood the test of time, I think that would help us designers put forward our solutions with a bit more confidence as well, because now we have examples to support the solutions that we're putting forward to the clients. So maybe that would help with our design work.
Awesome, that is really helpful. And now we have a few questions from the floor and things like that. And effectively, they all have been answered by yourselves, because I like to think that, you know, the panel that is here is the kind that goes above and beyond, and you have, because we ask one thing and then there's always knock-on effects that we have to think about. At this point, yes, we do have time. We've got 12 minutes on the clock. And again, this is not one of those formal things where, you know, everyone just says their piece and then, okay, what's next, right? So, but in terms of what's next, so maybe if I may, and this might seem sort of, shall we say, a bit disruptive, if you will, because sometimes that is a theme these days. A lot of people want to talk about disruptive technologies. But effectively, if I can envision, or just hypothetically speaking, although, you know, some of this exists in some form, shape or form already, if we have a centralized platform, right, that it's connecting, so it's sort of like an eBay for waste, Amazon for waste kind of situation, and, you know, we're connecting buyers and sellers and all of that, effectively we will change the marketplace. And, you know, if the way people trade commodities, for example, right, metals, minerals, that kind of a thing, people will trade waste that way, you know. And we can, is it correct to say, and maybe I should probably aim this question at someone, so let's say Raymond, right, from a council perspective, would it be correct to say that eventually the councils will become a really important sort of a satellite hub, if you will? Every regional council in Australia, and city included, will become a very important nexus where people will actually start buying waste directly off of you and forever change the way we look at waste, which means that people will actually start stockpiling at some point. Is that right, Raymond? Can you see that happening?
I definitely can see that happening. Some councils in regional areas are operating quite successful MRFs where they do trade materials well. They capture, we are the site where the materials are captured. we concentrate that material and send it elsewhere. So we are going to play important roles in establishing these markets. It's just being able to advertise, let people know what we have, where we have, what is around a region, and finding people who can use those resources. There is a large drive additionally to create jobs in these regions that will use these resources rather than transporting materials very long distances, but that there is definitely a role council to play in that.
Nice. Then if I may, as a follow-on, based on what the audience is asking about as well, and maybe it's a question for Cam, because you have different kinds of say engagement platforms, virtual marketplaces, where you have closed off ones, semi-open and fully open ones, like say eBay, right? You log on and then there it is. I want a toaster and oven, and you pen something and it's right there. So where do you actually see this going? Do you think that it's better to have like sort of a controlled environment, or just free market, open it for all? Because I see, and this is, Steve sort of really educated me on this, which is the traceability as well, because you need to know, yes, sure, you can get an idea of where it's coming from, but do you really? So what do you think, Cap?
Yeah, good question. Like, I think we've got partnerships with about 24 different councils around Australia,
Nice.
and we're really helping them with the management of a lot of their resources that come in and out, as well as their engagement with businesses. One of the key things that what we sort of do is we sort of assist with that chain of custody of the materials going through the platform. We can pretty much verify where it comes from, the volume, the frequency, the commodity. We've got 180 different commodities on the platform that can get exchanged. And the way that we sort of work is where we create ecosystems within ecosystems. So if it's rural, if it's regional, if it's metropolitan, whatever. But what we're trying to do is, we try to connect these businesses, and we want to try to open up to be sort of free, but not free, because you want to make sure that you don't get the untowards on there. You don't get any illegal dumping. You don't get people pilfering items, then taking what they want and dumping the rest. That's the last thing we want to do. And what we want to do is, the way sort of APPi works in the algorithm is we abide by the waste hierarchy. So, it's trying to be reuse, repurpose first, and that's what we do. We've got a lot of social enterprises on APPi. Like, there's one that collects all the e-waste. They either fix it or give it to disadvantaged Australians, or they recycle it. So again, bang, that's perfect, big tick. You can have a free membership. We don't care. Just get amongst it. That's what we're trying to do. And there's other businesses that make meals for disadvantaged Australians. Again, that's perfect. Massive tick, bang. There's an organisation that takes a lot of organic food and they feed it to lions and tigers. It's a zoo, obviously, but don't know how many zucchinis they eat, but obviously they do. But end of the day, we're trying to create these closed but open marketplaces. We want to make sure that we get businesses transacting. Obviously, municipal waste, it's a really big problem in Australia. But 80% of the waste generated in Australia comes from C&D and C&I. So that's a big portion of it. But the municipal places where we change that behaviour, we can actually get there and have these guys thinking about it, because behaviour starts at the home on the community level. Once you start getting these guys working at home, they take it to work and they start to demand it, especially as I'm a little bit older now. You get these younger generations come through and they're really after, like, what's your CSR? What are you trying to do? Like, what are you trying to do for the environment? How are you trying to help it? And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to engage these businesses and make sure we find sustainable homes for pretty much anything. The bigger the network, the better. That's what we're looking at.
That's right, 100% agree. And Cam was the one who told me that people waste a lot of food, and that it doesn't have to, all you have to find is someone who actually needs it, connect them up, and boom, you've done your good thing for the day, and it doesn't just stop, because now they know each other. It's going to happen every day. And that's really all it's about, isn't it? Putting people together.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And the one thing that APPi does is we're not commission based, so we don't click the ticket or anything like that. When we work with councils, they pay for business to use it, and councils can use it under their membership. So, there's no reason for these businesses to work off the platform. It's sort of like, just get on. Like, we don't care. You can have ongoing relationships that run for 10 years. We don't care, but we just want to be able to capture that data and be able to send projections and a few things like that, which is reason why we're all on this call, end of the day, isn't it? So
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. And it was very important for me, I guess, to sort of realize that at some level, yes, it was a very nice digital circular economy. Everyone's got a phone in their hands. You know, we're all linked by social media. And one thing that everyone has in common, doesn't matter what languages you speak, doesn't matter what, you know, what you wear to work, it really doesn't matter. At some point, we all generate waste. And Adrian actually very helpfully switched me on to this as of what, like half an hour ago, which was the fact that sometimes wasted things can be intangible, like ideas, right? We can all talk until we're blue in the face. And then at the end of the day, yep, attended very nice panel, social media, tick, tick, tick. And oh, I guess do you want to be famous, kiddo? So, and we're doing it for these little guys. Yep, say hi to the world, Omi. Yep. That's everybody. We're trying to do something good for you. Okay. Yep. Yeah, like I said, more like a podcast. Sorry about that. But yes, that's right. So this was really good for me. And at this point, instead of just letting me talk, I think, does anybody have any closing thoughts? Because we got 3-4 minutes on the clock. And does anybody have anything burning that you would like to say?
Can I just raise a point, expanding on what Cameron was saying about how the younger generation is asking questions on what efforts we are putting in to help with this whole sustainability concept and how it's important to get them engaged. I think that's a very good point that Cameron raised. And it's something that I've heard since I was in school, you know, that, oh, these are things which are good to do. And then it sort of fades into the background after a while. So I'm glad that Cameron mentioned it, because that's a very important aspect as well. So yes, we have the data, but to make that idea sustainable, see what I did there? To make that sustainable, you actually need to have the continuation in the efforts. And it's really good that this panel, we have people who are supporting that, who acknowledge that as well, that that's an important thing. So thank you, Cameron, for mentioning it, because that's a very important point.
No problems. And one thing I like to finish on is collaboration is the key, guys. Everyone on the panel, like no reason to reinvent the wheel. Like we've got a lot of great minds on this, even in this discussion, even probably listening. So why can't we all get together and work towards that common goal and leverage what everyone's got, you know, to really push and to really make that difference for Australia and the world.
Yep, I really love that, because that's actually, Kevin's 100% right. There's no I in team, right? So frankly, if, yeah, sure, I have a great idea, I might try a day, a week, a month, and then, you know, bills start to pile up. And then what do you want to do? You know, you just say, all right, well, look, I tried, you know, but then surely somebody out there, and now we know there's so many somebodies, the Q&A, the chat is just, you know, pinging, and everyone's been on that as well. And we've had, well, we actually hit half a century. We got 50 participants at its peak as well, which I think is actually really good. And at some point, because this is going to go live, well, this is live, and this is going to go online onto, you know, social media, like maybe YouTube and things like that. The panel, the message, the little unscheduled guest appearance, everything, you know, will live on. And I think that's okay, because at the end of the day, it's people, right? We're not just people who talk, but we walk the walk, I would say. And we are doing our part. I wouldn't say that, you know, Mercularis is the bee's knees. It kind of is with the air, but it's not the be all end all. At the end of the day, it needs people to pitch in. It needs people to be willing to help, even if they think they have nothing to gain, which is not true, because everybody here knows that we all stand to gain, right? The less stuff that goes into the landfill. Well, because Ray was saying, like, we were talking about, like, sometimes even single-digit lifespan left on some landfills. Wasn't that right, Raymond?
Well, across all of Australia, there's going to be councils with sites closing and approaching the end of their life. I'm fortunate I got one that lasts a long time, but it doesn't mean I want to use it to the end of its life.
Exactly. So with a minute left on the clock, big thank you to every single person who made it here today. I will stop the recording now and end the session. But thank you, you know, Steve, Cam, Ray, Puva, Carlos, Adrian. Thank you so much to Sarah, to Rupal, to Ali, you know, and Sandra, everybody in the organizing committee. I'm really sorry if you left anyone out. And of course to, you know, my co-founder, Beda Sultani. Thank you so much again for helping me start Mercularis. And really, I would love to take this offline with all of you. Thank you.